the world is already divided enough based on our color, based on our religion, based on our gender, based on our socioeconomic status, based on our education, based on our beauty and attractiveness, based on our smarts and intelligence, and based on where we live and what we eat. And it's just, there's so much division that I would just encourage everybody to watch these programs, but also leave comments that, let's less dividing, more unifying, less dividing, more unifying. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Soulful Intuitive. I wanted to thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. And if the content of our channel interests you or any of your family members and friends, please share the content with them. And now we are going to talk about today's topic, which is just a continuation of the past couple of weeks. As you might have noticed, we have done a little transition from self-work to a little bit of what's happening on the outside world as we're continuing to work on ourselves. I have provided you with a list of YouTube channels that I find very useful. Some of them are very liberal, some of them aren't, and some of them are right in the middle. And I think that's the importance of covering the whole spectrum and not really just sticking to the end that we're more comfortable with. Some of these websites, to name a few: Glenn Greenwald, Redacted, Russell Brand, Joe Rogan, Valuetainment, Gray Zone is good, The Hills, they kind of cover some things here and there, and also sometimes Breaking Point, not all the time, because I kind of find them to become more and more mainstream, which is why we all stopped watching television or listening to the mainstream channels, and we started to find our own way of finding what's really happening in the world. But what I wanted to cover, which happened, I think, a month ago or 2 months ago, that Redacted hosts, which was this married couple, and I think the gentleman, the host of the show, was working for Fox at some point. And so they had brought Russell Brand. Russell Brand was, I think, going around doing a tour in the US, and they brought him on the show. And it's so interesting when you're watching Russell Brand covering some things in the world as opposed to the other channels and the other platforms, because Russell Brand's approach is always very unifying, not so much as alarming as others would like to be. And they talked about this with him, that even when they watch Russell Brand, they feel a bit more calm, they feel less afraid, because let's face it, the fear is what hooks us, and it's the bait. And even with Russell Brand, when you just read some titles before listening to him, it's always like, it's the end of this, it's the end of that, it's, they've done it, just these catchphrases that are very catchy and also kind of just makes you feel a little alarmed that now you have to click on it just to see what is ending or what is beginning or what have they done today. And what I really liked about how he was approaching it was, listen, when a flower or a tree, as beautiful as it is, has its own shadow in the sun. So basically, wherever there's up, there's down. Wherever there's left, there's right. Wherever there's light, there's dark. But are we going to focus on the light, or are we going to focus on the dark, or are we going to focus on the whole thing? Which is some of the, I would say, more right-leaning or left-leaning channels seem to approach it with, they did it again, it's the end of this, it's the end of that, go and store lentils and beans and canned food, because it's the end of the world and Armageddon's coming. And then, or that's it, it's the end of democracy, it's the end of humanity, it's the end of freedom, it's the end of our healthcare, it's the end of... So, and I'm sure their hearts are in the right place, but they also are running a business and they need audience because that's how they make their livelihood. And so, you know, when you are thinking or when you're reading a title that's very kind of coming from a place of fear, coming from a place of concern, you will click on it because you want to know what the hell has happened. I wanted to talk about this, and I agree with Russell Brand that it's very important to not stick to one side, and it's very important not to only, like, if you're on the right, let's not only berate the left. And if you're on the left, let's not only berate the right. And let's just be unifying. Let's just include everyone and everything. And you can talk about the downfalls, but you could also and should talk about the ups and talk about the positives, because you don't want people to watch your channel and walk away and feel helpless, because that's exactly what is going to contribute to more chaos. Because when you are promoting fear unintentionally, fear is what you're going to get. And fear doesn't bring the perfect color of humanity. It doesn't bring the best in any of us. When we're fearful, we are stooped down to our animal level, and then we act out of maybe just survival instincts. We act just selfishly, we act ruthlessly, and we might regret it later, but it doesn't change the fact that our actions are now done and it will have consequences. And that's what has contributed to this polarization, and how people from the same family group or friend groups aren't talking to each other because everybody thinks that they're right and the other side is wrong, which is just not true. And it's important to talk to people. If you call yourself liberal or Democrat, or I don't know what they're called, the equivalent in Europe, then you should talk to the other side. And when you realize that your needs are the same, when you realize that most of your concerns are the same, and the parts that aren't the same are the parts that are worth talking about and are worth focusing on without getting angry and without going into conversations with the intention to change the other person's mind, but really going into it with curiosity to maybe learn something that you didn't know before, but also be excited that maybe you're going to teach someone something that they didn't know before. And if everybody just does a little bit of that, not even a lot, then things will change drastically, and these barriers are going to be gone. And I think it's wonderful that when I read the comments from all of these platforms, people are listening to them, are watching them from all walks of life. And regardless of who the guest is, you see what people are thinking. And also what, let's say, most of those audience members who are leaving comments, where they're at with their understanding of the world and with the understanding of the topic. And if we don't do that, then there's no difference between the content makers on the mainstream media and the content makers on YouTube or other platforms, because those platforms also didn't start off with this level of polarity. But of course, money talks, and they understood that if they only bring, a certain group from a certain spectrum as their audience and feed them more and more fear of the other side, then they will make more money because they can sell those ads and they can make sure that people are watching in defiance of the other side. And that's just not a good business model. You want to bring all kinds of people, and you want to make sure that they're coming in to listen to you because they're going to walk away with a little bit more understanding, but also with a little bit more feeling of peace and harmony and hope. And if that's not is the intent, then there's no difference. It's just a different place, different platform, but the same outcome, and it's ultimately going to do the same thing, which we are trying very hard to walk away from. And of course, it didn't happen overnight. It's been going on for a few decades, but of course, it's been ramped up in the past couple of years exponentially. So it's good to question when you're talking to people that are not necessarily listeners of the platforms you watch, and then ask them, okay, like, where are you getting your information? And then give it a good, wholehearted hour or two, and just really understand who they're bringing, what they're talking about, what kind of a feeling you get after watching it. And then maybe reach out to the same person and say, you know what, I watched this show and it was so interesting, or not. And I was wondering if you would be interested in watching this show. But also leave comments for these platforms, because ultimately it's people's comments that make them rethink. I remember that Breaking Point, her and Sagar, they brought Mr. Kennedy, and she's just going to let him talk. And she was just barking at him the whole time. And then when I was reading the comments, people really attacked her, that you didn't let the man talk. That was so rude. You were just throwing your opinions on him, and it wasn't your interview. You were interviewing him, and you wanted to hear about what he's going to be running on and what he's all about. And they were forced to bring him back. Of course, the second time that she brought him back, she didn't really say much, but also it was very obvious that they had to do it to make their audience happy, because the audience were not happy. So that's the power of people who are watching these shows and listening to these broadcasts. For example, the owner of Valuetainment, Patrick, was on Joe Rogan, and Patrick brought up this whole tired concept that he's been spewing around for the past little while, about how 20 years ago, the statistics show that there was less than 1% of people who identified as homosexual, and now it's more than 20% are identifying somewhere on the spectrum, not necessarily homosexual, which, by the way, is such a broad spectrum. And so they're grooming us, our kids, and it's an agenda. And Joe just listened to him and said, well, no, because 20 years ago, if like you came out of the closet, or 30 years ago when you came out of the closet, you would lose your apartment, you would lose your job, you would lose your family, you would get attacked, you would get ostracized, your livelihood would have been in danger. So of course people weren't coming out of the closet. And it felt so good when finally somebody spoke the truth. But Patrick kept just repeating it. But if you're old, you don't give a shit, and you come out like that. So how come people weren't coming out then? Again, because they were old. They still had family. They still had landlords. They still had jobs. They still had to survive. It's such a fallacy that, oh, when you're old, you just say it like it is. No, you say it like it is, because usually when you're older, you're more established. You have more freedom. Maybe you have a little bit of money. Maybe people need you. So of course, it's that power dynamics have shifted. But that argument was so weak, and Joe, rightfully so, went ahead and straightened him out. And he said, no, it's just not true. That this now people feel more comfortable because the culture, the society has made them feel safe enough to step forward and say, this is who I am, and this is what I'm all about, or this is how I've always felt. Because they know that in certain countries, they're not going to lose their job. They're not going to get physically attacked as much because the threat is still there. They're not going to maybe lose all of their family and friends, because luckily maybe there is more tolerance for diversity, and maybe there's been enough education about how we're not living in a black and white world, and how there's a spectrum of gray, and it's okay to not for all of us to be exactly the same. So people have faith in each other that, okay, if I tell you something that's very important to me and is part of who I am, then you're not going to hurt me with that information. So that's why more and more in democratic societies and societies where there's some sort of freedom still in place, then people can just state their truth and maybe come out of the closet if they're in the closet, and tell their family and friends, and also answer the statistics correctly. Because there's a movie called Kinsey, and that's the name of a scientist who did the research about just sex, like gay, lesbian, bi, and everything in between. And he just ran all these experiments and questionnaires. And even back then, the percentage was not 1%, because he made sure that the people who were engaging in that research and participating, that all of their names were redacted. It was completely anonymous, so people felt more comfortable answering those questions. And the results of the Kinsey research was so controversial that the same, I think it was the Rockefeller who were funding the research, that they had to shut it down because the findings were very upsetting for certain groups in our society, because they basically took the lid off of what they thought was happening in society versus what was really happening, and what percentage of men and women were attracted and also were engaged in same-sex romance and same-sex relationships, and very candid about their experiences, but nonetheless, the results are there, and they made a movie about it, which I think was also nominated for Oscars many years ago. So just like that, Joe debunked that opinion, because that's Patrick's opinion based on what he's comfortable reading from and the statistics. And I have a lot to say about that channel, and I still watch it because they bring so many people from all walks of life, left and right and middle. Sure, Patrick likes the sound of his voice and he likes to talk a lot, but at the same time, I get to listen to other people as well, and they have their own audience. And, you know, every now and then somebody does say something that I'm sure makes them rethink the way that they're dividing people, because this division is not going to be going anywhere positive, and the world is already divided enough based on our color, based on our religion, based on our gender, based on our socioeconomic status, based on our education, based on our beauty and attractiveness, based on our smarts and intelligence, and based on where we live and what we eat. And it's just, there's so much division that I would just encourage everybody to watch these programs, but also leave comments that, you know, less dividing, more unifying, less dividing, more unifying. And the number one most important thing about Mr. Kennedy that is so appealing to everyone is he's running as a Democrat in the U.S., but he's not saying that the Republicans are bad. As a matter of fact, he is encouraging everybody to come together. He's not berating anyone particular president from the other side of the aisle, and people try to trap him all the time with, what do you think about Trump, and what do you think about Bush, and what do you think about this? And he was like, hey, listen, I'm not going there. I'm not attacking anyone. I'm not here to attack and divide. I'm here to reach out to everyone and bring them together. And I really hope that this happens on a global scale, and people wake up that, you know, this whole, you know, people across the border are the enemy, or people across my educational line are the enemy, or people who call their God a different name are the enemy. These are so old concepts, and they've been used to divide and rule us forever. And I think that just like how, and I only speak from my experience, that just like how gays and lesbians and bisexuals really reached out to their friends and family and members of their society and just told them about their experiences and how they're not that different. As a matter of fact, they're almost the same. And that brought unity. We should bring that approach to everything else in our world, whether it's politics or education or religion. And there's beauty in a Christian going to the mosque and for a Muslim going to the church, and people can coexist and respect each other's beliefs and respect each other's angles, because we're different. We all look at the world from a different angle. We have a different goggles on. Nobody sees the world exactly the same as someone else. And that's just the beauty, because, the universe, the creator or God, is experiencing itself from our own eyes. So from every single person on this planet and every single creature in this world. So of course, you want to get unlimited, infinite different views and angles from who you are to understand yourself and to get to know yourself and to experience yourself better. Thank you very much for watching this show, and I will talk to you very soon on our next episode. Thank you.